I would like to call upon our next guest speaker, Dr. Umamaheshwaran Rajasekar, Urban Resilience Advisor for Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Dr. Rajasekar.
Thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure, joining you all today to talk about some of the work which we do within CDRI. For those of you who don't know CDRI, it's a coalition of member countries, and we currently have 37 member countries, and UK was one of our initial partners and supporters to the coalition, and has also been quite critical in implementing some of the strategies and plans across member countries. One of the initiatives which we do is also targeted towards small island development states. So why infrastructure resilience is going to be important, and how BIM could be made integral part of this is something which I'll try to dwell through this. And this is part of one of the recent report which we had launched, the biennial report. Okay. One of the key aspect is that we globally, we have all committed to the sustainable development goals, and integrating these sustainable development goals in some of our investment is going to be very critical. And there is also a complexity associated with it. One is that when we talk about all these goals individually, it's much more easier to address and target. But when we look at it collectively, and when we look at the cross correlation of how our infrastructure investment, especially the critical infrastructure investments, are going to lead to these goals, is something one needs to have a holistic and also a systemic approach, which maybe the BIM can provide. And what is happening right now is the extent of investment and also the extent of asset value per capita ranges drastically. Some of the developed nation has close to 200 USD, 200,000 USD per capita in terms of the infrastructure investment. But when you look at some of the developing countries, and especially the low and middle income countries, it is less than $3,000. What this means is that moving forward, most of these countries are going to go towards investing in infrastructure, and that is the same story in India. When you look at the extent of assets which are currently existing and the extent of assets which we are going to build over the next 10 to 15 years, it's quite phenomenal. When you look at some of the numbers, it is actually what India has invested over the last 70 years. In terms of the infrastructure, they are planning to invest the same amount or the equivalent in the next 10 to 15 years. So it's very important at this point of time to make sure that whatever we do are informed through latest technology, but also informed through appropriate policies and measures, so that those infrastructure investments last for the next 50 years to come. What we are also seeing is, the larger infrastructure governance is also quite weak, and we need technology to, inform them. And even this is something which was discussed as part of the G20. Quality infrastructure investment or quality infrastructure QII principles are going to be very, very critical. And one of the things where we need to ensure is not only in terms of designing, but also in terms of operation and maintenance of these infrastructure systems. And we keep seeing that, the recent disaster in the state of Himachal Pradesh, the recent disaster in Sikkim, it is, all these roads which were constructed in the last 5 to 10 years got washed away. and it was not that the roads were not built properly. It was just built in those terrains where the landslide risk was quite high, and they didn't take necessary precautions to safeguard those investments which they have done. And this has a cascading effect in terms of affecting not only the state government in reinvesting across these infrastructure, but also the critical connectivity when these roads are needed to cater to emergencies. They basically they are not there, and also they are not able to use that for transferring the immediate relief efforts to the most vulnerable people. So when we look in terms of the overall infrastructure quality, as you can see that it's quite weak globally, and this is also the case in terms of many of these low and middle income countries, and all these new infrastructure investments, they need to take into consideration the risks. And that is an area where BIM can play a very key role. The annual average loss which is occurring right now. So what we are doing is we are investing close to 78% of our GDP towards these infrastructure. But overall, in terms of the total asset value what we have, we are losing close to 2 to 5% due to natural events, calamities. We are losing out that much. So when you look at it from a larger perspective, we are losing out 50% of our annual investment to disasters. And what that means, if at all we aspire to achieve the sustainable development goal or a development process over the next 15 years, that is going to extend, that is going to take us 30 years to achieve the same, because whatever we are doing, we are not taking into consideration the risk, we are not taking into consideration the quality, and also with the recent evidence of climate extremes, more and more these assets are being lost. So there is three key infrastructures. If you look in terms of the power, telecommunication, wastewater, oil, ports, airports, and roads and railways, I think the majority of it is the roads and railways, which which are at risk, and this is also followed by some of the power and telecom infrastructure. Especially due to cyclones, wind speeds. The wind speeds are increasing, and much of these infrastructure do not take that into consideration. What we need to do is, whenever these infrastructure assets are being designed, of course, how disaster management can be taken into consideration, both in terms of the planning, but also in terms of when you have the digital database, they can also come in handy for the responders, when they are trying to cater to it post an event. I think I was just talking to Shabik during the break, and UK government has created a digital twin, and that can be used for simulating floods and trying to see how the assets respond to these extreme events. Can then once again inform the new investments which are going into those urban areas. So the other key aspect, I don't know, this is something which whether the BIM can address it or not, but more and more what we also need to look is not only the grey infrastructure, but also the green and blue combined together, because many a times there is one need to look at it from a holistic perspective. One also needs to look at it from an ecosystem perspective. One also needs to look at it from an environment perspective. Many of the infrastructure what we design are also being lost because of not taking into consideration the environmental parameters surrounding that particular infrastructure, and how people or how these interact with it, especially during an event. So what I do propose is how do we move from risk to resilience? There is a huge opportunity for us because much of the Indian investments are going to take place in the next 15 years. So that is an opportunity for us to start planning, designing, using new technologies, using new methods to understand the risk profile and also cater to it. And similarly, in events of post-disasters, what we have managed to do in the last 2 decades is that we have managed to reduce the life loss, but we have not managed to bring down the infrastructure asset loss from the natural, hazards and events. And with climate change, with more and more of these events are going to, increase both in terms of frequency and intensity, it is going to be very, very important for us to use digital tools to simulate, to see the impact, to see the cross connect, and also to see the integrated aspect of, other ways to safeguard these assets, and looking at, how our investments can give benefit, and how these investments can be sustainable. Not only from an environmental perspective, but sustainable to last for the next few decades to come. So I'll stop here. This is also the case of policies and strategies and plans. One of the key reasons why many of these things are not being implemented is the lack of policies, and I think that is where once again the Indian government and the UK government, learning from each other's experience, can bring about appropriate policies which can enable these private sectors and also these infrastructure investors to look in terms of the resilience over time. We have also come up with certain metrics, and this is available online. This is a global risk database, and if you, this can be used by Indian infrastructure investors too, and see how technologies like BIM can take into account of that risk, and also use that for some of the simulations which you would like to do it at a micro level, and also come up with resilience standards and project pipelines which can once again look in terms of many broad principles. I'll stop here, but there are few aspects where BIM can play a very, very key role, especially in terms of the initial phase of project design and disaster simulation, but also in terms of post event response, rehabilitation, and also relief efforts. I'll stop here, but we'll be glad to take any questions, and if there aren't, yes, please.
Just touching on what you said there's a difference between risk and resilience. In terms of building for the future, what's the most important thing in ag? Is it the lack of data, or is it what is stopping nations from building more resilient infrastructure?
So I would suggest that no, it's not the lack of data, because over the last 2 or 3 decades there are different agencies, especially the insurance companies, have started generating data, and now because of the global constellation of satellites and the increasing number of asset information and risk information are able to capture it. And even CDRA has launched a global risk data platform where much of the probabilistic risks are made open to people to use it for their data purpose. The problem why people are not using is the additional cost, the additionality. Of course, if you are designing your stormwater drainage for once in a 10-year event and once in a 50-year event, the cost is 2x. So people are not willing to invest that. They want to, and especially this is a larger problem in low and middle income countries, that they want to cater to the maximum population with a minimum service efficiency, which is not bad, of course. But the idea is, in the process, they just only look in terms of an engineering solution, and they don't look in terms of the, like I said, the environment. They don't look in terms of the nature-based options for integrating it, and the larger problem is also operation and maintenance of these assets in the longer run. Yes, please.
Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Just a two-part question. The first is about the resilience concept as such. I would like your opinion as CDRI on how much would this resilience be related to the built infrastructure as compared to the people using that infrastructure. So that's my first question. And the second question is much more related to the data. Is there any effort from the CDRS side in terms of understanding the linkages between the micro kind of data modules like BIM, where we have a lot of detail on the built assets, to a much larger macro kind of analysis, the kind of climate and global action which you are seeing. So are there linkages on what is the minimum data sets which are required from your built environments in order to carry out such kind of analysis? Is there some effort going on that side?
So answering your first question, when we talk about resilience, we talk about two things. One is infrastructure resilience and resilient infrastructure. So what that means is, whatever we do in terms of investment for these infrastructure, they should benefit people at large. They should cater to the people at large, and they should not end up being the root cause of some of the problems and challenges. For example, if you build a road, the road should not be the major cause of flooding. The road should make sure that that it caters to people even in times of floods. And resilient infrastructure is that whether the roads which are built today are taking into account the heat waves which may come in the near future, or the flooding extremes which may happen in the near future. So both infrastructure resilience and resilient infrastructure is something which we do take into consideration. And coming to your next question, how can models like BIM play a key role? I gave the example of UK, and right now Indian government under its 15th Finance Commission is also implementing urban flood risk mitigation grant, and this is being provided to 7 cities, and 50%, I think out of these 7 cities, each of them get around 250 crores and things like that. But the money is for creating these kinds of digital models for cities to understand how the flood is going to interact with the infrastructure. Right now we don't know that because of the macro-micro problem. We have a very clear understanding that what will be the extreme probabilistic return period of rainfall, but right now when the IMD gives an announcement that you're going to get 200 mm of rainfall, people don't know what it means to my building, what it means to me traveling to work, or children going to school, so on and so forth. And that's where BIM technologies like BIM can play a key role. Trying to change these broad brush understanding to a specific information which can go out. From 200 mm rainfall, if somebody gets that you're going to have 1 feet of water outside your house, people can get prepared better. People can use that information to plan their life, work, and also business around it. So that is the value one should propose and create. There is a lot of things which can be internalized. People are very smart enough to do that. But right now the information is very generalized and they are not able to do that. So.
I think excellent presentation is opening up the mind to really, connect digitalization and sustainability even in a more stronger and robust way. The question I have for you is, I think you gave a very good example, and if I take a particular, utility, and if I want to make that utility capable of, meeting the demand in 50 years time frame vis-a-vis 10 years, there's a cost difference, and most of the time that's a bottleneck. Now, if you really, if you are a signing authority who's investing, and if I go and present an argument which is based on prediction of predictions, so you are predicting a heat wave, based on that prediction I'm predicting a cyclone, based on that cyclone I'm predicting probably a surge in the water level, and then based on that prediction I'm considering some engineering assumptions, and then I need to invest 2 times right now. So this is also happens when we are promising people on digitalization about the benefits, maybe 5 years down the line, very short term, but then this is a similar situation. Is there any initiative where we are doing a forensic studies of existing disasters and connecting that with enough evidences where a similar replay, if we do from a future perspective, that gives more confidence? I'm pretty immature and kind of, I don't have much idea about this sector. So the question is, if there is any forensic study of the past incidents, like we had Chennai flood now, can I connect that Chennai flood to some kind of a heat wave set that happened somewhere? So if that kind of initiatives are happening, then probably the confidence to take that 2x decision will increase. So if you can just enlighten us on this particular difference of, forensic study versus predictive assumptions.
Right, absolutely. I think most of our learning happens from disaster, and rather than from these, models. When we use the models and improve the models to try to simulate what has happened in the past. And sometimes I keep telling people that, forget about climate change, just look at the last 50 to 100 years data, and you will have similar incidences. And are you taking into consideration those extremes, which has happened already in the past? And that makes sense. And there is an initiative which we are soon going to start, and we are also documenting that. It's like learning from disasters. How can we learn from other countries? How can we learn from different regions? How can we also learn from the good practices which are taking place across? This is something, it's an ongoing effort. And what is happening right now is that our urban landscape is changing at a very rapid pace. And many a times these models are not updated to keep up with that change. For example, city of Chennai, if you look at 20 years back, and the percentage green cover has reduced drastically. There was a study by Dutch government and came up with, there are 1,000 lakes within the city which have gone missing, and which used to be these flood retention areas and so on and so forth. So a lot of things, how fast we are able to upgrade. And when you use models like BIM, and that is something which one needs to consider, it is not only at the initial stage one tries to digitize and use the technology to plan, but it is also during the operation and maintenance, the changes which happens over time. How much of those changes can be updated, or there needs to be some kind of a body or a agency which keeps incorporating those changes which happen over time. So that is very much needed. But to answer your question short, I think yes, we need to learn from disasters. We are trying to document that. We are trying to look in terms of case studies of how different places, different governments are reacting or responding to these events. And I think we are all collectively learning in that particular process. But connection, cross correlation in terms of whether a flood will lead to a heat wave, will lead to a cyclone, that doesn't take place. It's very difficult to do that. There can be number of, because all these are global, phenomena which are not so straightforward. You can't create such direct correlation until unless it is something related to the geophysical. Like a flood may lead to a landslide. That kind of a correlation, direct correlation can take place, but not across all the events.
Yeah, mine is not a question, probably the answer what you asked a question that whether BIM can help. Yes, the three things need to be done, whichever the new projects which you are probably earmarking for this thing to be resilient, it need to be having the done on BIM platforms and process to be implemented. Second is that this asset owners or asset managers or asset maintainers, they need to be brought into the board immediately so that they can give the requirements back to the engineers or designers or even contractors, that they can be incorporated the way they want, so that informations are available during the maintenance or even earlier. And third is that what you just now said, there has to be a digital twin need to be always maintained, so that whatever changes happen, that goes on incorporating on that. It's a continuous process. BIM definitely is going to help, because this is a information based decision.
Yes.
Information, if it is available, right information available in the right point of time, that is what is required. I think answer is yes.
Yes. And my another suggestion is, if you can come up with that dollar cost, people will also invest in BIM and they can see value in it. That during the life cycle of that particular infrastructure, you will end up saving this much because of using this particular technology in your maintenance, in your operations. So people see value in investing around those things which are cost saving in the long term. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I request you to just be on stage with us a moment longer? And definitely thank you for enlightening us on the subject and giving us a peek into the future. We definitely hope that our future generations have a better world to live in. And with that, may I request Mr. Shobhi Ganguly, Senior Infrastructure Advisor, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, Government of UK, to present the memento.